We're going to talk about punching parameters for our Tips and Tricks Tuesday. And part of punching parameters is tack down stitches. And you'll sometimes hear them called as tie-in or tie-off stitches. And what these are a series of stitches that make sure things like lettering or the beginning and end of your design don't come unraveled as you wear your item or as it's used or as it's washed. Now, most programs, but not all, have automatic tie-in and tie-off stitches. And you're going to want to check what program you're using because I've had some very expensive programs that did not have this option as an automatic thing. So, right now I'm in the Generations program and I'm going to show you what this program offers right now in the scope of tie-in and tie-off stitches by just simply making sure this is selected and going into my settings. So if I go over, you see the tie-off setting, right? And here's my tie-in and my tie-off. And what that means is where I start, there's a tie-in. So if you've ever had lettering where it begins to unfray or unravel as you wash it, you might want to look and see, if you have the design, if it has a tie-in and a tie-off point. You can see the one that we're using is this very simple one, but it does a very effective job. Now, I'm going to go ahead and change my tie-in to this and my tie-off to that, and say okay. And what I want to show you is, let me go out of 3D here and I'm going to zoom in very close. Now in my tie-in, which is here, you don't notice that tie-in because, well, it's not really causing a big issue. The tie-off over here, however, you might very well see, and I don't know if I can show it to you here, but you can see it's right there. Well, the tie-off is going to sit on top of your stitching, which is going to show. If you have a running line, these tie-in and these tie-off options really are going to be an issue, right? Let me go in and change those on a line. So you have to kind of pay attention to what is going on with your tie-in and tie-off stitches. See? And the reason it's showing here is it starts here and then backtracks over, and here's my out point. Those would definitely show, even though I'm zoomed up real big. If I go to 101 and go out of this needle penetration view, you can still see they're going to show. So you have to be careful what you pick for your tie-in and tie-off options. Obviously, on a line, you would want the more simple tie-in and tie-off, which is just a step forward, step back, step forward stitch. On this, you could have different tie-in and tie-offs and still be effective. This is a stronger tie-in, but my tie-off is going to show, so I might want to use that and say okay. Now, Generations offers two types of tie-in and tie-off, and that doesn't resolve a problem if you happen to have gotten a design that doesn't have these tie-in and tie-offs. So we're going to take a look at what we can do, and you can do this in any program that allows you to rearrange your stitching order. So let me go ahead and make a new file, and I want to show you what your basic tie-in and tie-off stitches are. And I'm going to make them big so you can see them. So the basic tie-in and tie-off stitch is this: one step forward, and every time I say step, I'm talking about a stitch. One step forward, one step back, one step forward. And it's usually in a series of 3, although you can put them in a series of 5. What you might not want to do is put it in an even number. You want it to end here. So there's a very simple tie-in, tie-off. Now, the other tie-in and tie-off that we saw in Generations was this, where you have, here's your last stitch in the area, then it swings over and makes what kind of like a semi-star type of tie-in, and it goes something like this, right? And that's a little more complicated tie-in and tie-off you know, but these stitches might still be susceptible to, pulling out just like this last one might be. So there's stronger tie-ins and there's stronger tie-offs. For example, at the end I might want to use this one, so I might want to go, one stitch forward, one stitch back, one stitch forward, and then just ever so slightly, 1, 2. Okay, so in here what I've done is create a very strong tie off, and the way I'm going to show you this is by going into these penetrations. And I moved these up so you could really, you could put them right on top of each other, but that'll be a very tight tie-in. Remember, I'm zoomed up quite a bit here. Alright, so let's zoom back out. These are basic tie-ins, but there are more tie-ins and tie-offs that you might want to look at. So let's take a look at a very, very strong tie-in. You can use it for a tie-off, but usually these are going to be for tie-ins. It would be something like this. And remember, I'm making these big so you can see the detail better. And that's a pretty good tie-in. For a tie-off, it would definitely show. Or, there's another one that is maybe a little less obnoxious for showing at the end if you want to really lock down some things like large lettering. And it's, really like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me go back. I went a little bit too far. So you would go 3, 4, 5, and 6. Something similar to this, right? I wouldn't make maybe these swings quite as dramatic, but if you did something like this when you're making your tie-in and tie-off, right, then you really could keep these very close to each other. That main line close to these swings. And then just place an extra click there to lock it in. And here we are. That would be a very effective tie-in and tie-off stitch if you could control the size of this. Okay, now, sometimes you're going to hear the word lock stitching. And there are, lock stitches are great. I've told you how, these are the tie-in and tie-offs, and lock stitches are very similar. But for example, my lock stitch would be, 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. Okay, that's a basic lock stitch. Let's go ahead and generate this. And that's a basic lock stitch, right? Well, then there's some other ones that are a little less basic, but you can use these as well for tie-in and tie-off stitches if you're manually creating them. You'd be like 1, 2, you're gonna crisscross 3 and 4, and that's kind of a basic one. It's similar to this. And then there's one that's similar, to this in a way, but it's a little bit stronger. And if you keep this very close, you could use these lock stitches as well. So for example, maybe you have, 1, 2 here, and then you're going to come back, right? 3, 4, and 5. So you could keep this one very close. You could keep this one very close. And it's very similar to this. So it depends on what size you're going to make this. Now, what does all of this have to do with, better designs? Well, if you have some designs, or if you have a program that doesn't create your lock stitches automatically, you can use these manually punched patterns for lock stitches. For example, if we open up a design that I know doesn't have lock stitches or tie-in or tie-off stitches that I purchased, then I can add these. And let me show you how easily that's done. And it doesn't matter what program you're in, you just have to be able to reorder your designs or your design pieces. Okay, so here we are. This is a design that I actually created, but I used a program that did not automatically create these lock stitches, and I was really kind of shocked that it didn't. So it's a pretty simple thing here. If I right click here, it's not really going to tell me what my stitch type is, of course, because I imported this, but I am going to zoom in real close and go out of 3D here. All right, so there's my in and my out point. And you can see, there really doesn't seem to be any lock stitches, but to show you for sure, that there are no lock stitches, if we go up here and look at what's stitching first, we go 101 here, it's going to be these, applique lines, right? And then this. And this is the same thing. It doesn't have any lock stitches. These are all going to be different colors, but there are no lock stitches in any of this, which causes a little bit of a problem. So let's go to our playthrough. And, I'm going to just kind of go one stitch at a time. Let's get past these lines. Okay, so that's, that's kind of like the applique line, right? Let me go back here. So, those are going to stop so I can trim and, start putting in my, cover stitches. All right, so here we are. I'm going to zoom in real close. And let's go back. Okay, here we go. I'm finishing up this applique. Now, as we start, you can see it just goes. Just starts stitching, right? There isn't really any lock. Now, this one might be okay because it's going to be covered up with, other stitching. But what happens sometimes, because this is satin stitching, is that this doesn't even pick up in the first place. So you end up with, your string or your thread not picking up that bobbin thread on the bottom, and you already have a problem. So here we are. Here's where we start. This is where this design starts. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of zoom out here and we'll play it through here. So as it's playing along, you can see it comes down here, it comes back up, and I might be okay on this one just for the simple fact that it'll get covered up, but if it started, then I've got a problem if it didn't pick up the thread at the beginning. And you can see as we go through here, I'm coming up towards the end here, so I'm going to slow it down and zoom up, and you can see there's not going to be any tie-off stitches either. And I'll shift my toolbar back here. I just kind of don't want to really restart that. Okay, so here we go. We're coming into this, and it's going to stop because there's another piece there. So, and it ends. Like, let me go back just for a second. There it ends, right here. And let me zoom in. There are no tie-off stitches. So, this is going to be a problem. Let me move my toolbar back where it's supposed to be rather than where it ended up. Okay, so this is going to be a problem. This is going to unravel. And more than likely, it's going to unravel down here too because it won't catch it at the beginning. All right, so there's my stitch player. So we know that this is a problem. And these all have problems. Every single one of them. Now, I can save time by just digitizing once what I want my lock stitches or my tie in and tie off stitches to be. I only have to do it right once. So I'm going to zoom in really big here, and I'm going to pick this tool, or you can pick your running stitch tool. Just make sure it's only going in a single run. But if I pick this tool and I say, okay, my tie in stitch, I want it to be very strong. So I could make a lock stitch or I can make a tie-in stitch. It's up to me, right? But I'm going to go ahead and I'll just make kind of a basic tie-in stitch. So 1, 2, and 3 and 4. All right, so there we go. Now, let me zoom out. I'm going to take this, which is really big. We're going to move down here and zoom in. Now, I'm going to resize this, of course. It's not supposed to be very big, so I just resize it very small. And, we start up here, so, that's where I'm going to go ahead and place this. Now, it doesn't do me a whole lot of good because it's stitching at the very bottom, right? So, I'm just going to move this to the first stitching order, however you can do it, or however you have to do it. I'm just going to move it to the top, and then of course I'm going to change the color so that I don't have a color trim. So now it's the same color as this, and there it is, right? And I know it's right there. So remember, it's in the first stitching position, and at this point I would copy and paste it and keep that little extra copy. Now we know that it ends over here. Any program will show you where your out points are basically, so we know it ends over there, right? So let's go one on one, and I can use the same lock stitch. Here it is. Remember, we scaled it way down, and I can say, you know what, it needs to go right there, and so it needs to move to right after this at the very, very end. And I'll change the color just so you can see it. And I would just move it to the position it needs to be in, which is right after this. And there it is. Okay, now, and I did kind of mess up because here's our applique I forgot about. It needs to go right before this, so here we go. Here's the tie-in that we made, here's the stitching, and here's the tie-off. And I'm just going to make it the same color as this. Okay, so there you go. Now I would just copy and paste because each one of these is going to have an issue. For example, I already know these don't have tie-in and tie-offs, right? So why wouldn't I just paste that and then move it to here's the first one, so there's my in and there's my out. Here's my in point, right? Here's my out point. I might have moved that to the wrong spot. Let me turn it pink so I can see it. Makes it a little bit easier. All right, so there's my pink place here. Okay, in, right? Lock stitch, out, I would put it up there. So here's my pink lock stitch, copy, paste, out point up there, move that up there. There you go. So I'm locking this up and I'm locking this down. These are small, they're not really going to show up as the lock stitches in any of this, and you can see over here, you're not really going to see that. It's very small. So I could do it that way, and once I've got the size right and the stitch type that I want